Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul, the Canadian Snowman, here once again with another awesome video. Why siege towers are wrong. History and evolution. I don't know why your siege towers wrong. I thought they worked pretty good. Like I've done a lot of history videos. If you're new to my channel, I've done a lot of playlists on different wars. And definitely, and a lot of sieges and siege towers were used, because you need those to get up, above the castle, the fort, or whatnot to get inside. And obviously, they have their drawbacks. It takes like a lot of men probably to use them, and trying to get those towers just to get them up to the castle. I mean, you're at high risk, trying to do that, but there's not a whole lot of other options besides, using cannons and putting a hole through a wall kind of thing, right? Or just run up there with a giant ladder. Why are they wrong? I'm kind of curious why they say that. But anyway, this is from Invicta, another great channel that I use. Anyways, hit that like and subscribe button below. So I just did the last video I did was a siege, and so when I saw this, I guess it's a quick video, and I'm interested. I don't expect it to really do that well, but I'm interested, so I'm going to do a video. Yeah, hit a like and subscribe, and let's jump to it.
One of the things that's been bugging me for a while now is the false depiction of siege towers in pop culture. This extends to all settings from antiquity to the Middle Ages. Usually what you get is something like this scene from Kingdom of Heaven, where dozens of towers.
That's a great movie, man. It's a great movie. So I guess it wasn't like this. I mean, how is... I guess I'll let him explain.
Usually what you get is something like this scene from Kingdom of Heaven, where dozens of towers are lined up for a mass assault, ready to disgorge hundreds of troops upon the walls all at once. At this point, it's become a trope that seems required to convince the audience that the siege taking place is truly an epic one. You see this in all kinds of movies, video games, and artwork. The siege tower which has emerged from this is basically a glorified troop elevator used for full-on frontal assaults. However, this runs
well, not really elevator, because it has like a little stairwell or whatever, or maybe little ladders, in the side of it. And yeah, you get... I mean, they might not even have that. Don't they just have like maybe a dozen soldiers up top, maybe not even that much. And there might not even be a ladder, and they get in and then try to jump down to open the door. I don't know. There has to be like a ladder or something inside to get more people up there. Anyways, I should let this guy finish talking.
Glorified troop elevator used for full-on frontal assaults. However, this runs contrary to its historical use. Let's now explore the true history of the siege tower.
Okay.
A big thanks to the Great Courses Plus for sponsoring this video.
Okay, so he's, it has its use, it probably works, but not the way that, we have in our minds when it comes to, whatever, because of the movies and stuff like that. So let's see how it was truly done.
Content. Definitely check out lectures 19 and 20, which explore the fascinating period of the Peloponnesian War. That you take a look at what they have to offer, and
which began basically as soon as humans thought to protect themselves. Siege warfare, which is just a small part of the overall history of siege warfare, which began basically as soon as humans thought to protect themselves from attack. This started with our earliest civilizations, who threw up wooden palisades to protect their settlements, or erected mud brick walls to shield their cities. Yet soon, these first walls would be met with improvised ladders and tree trunk battering rams. As a counter, the defender would build taller, thicker, and stronger fortifications, which in turn led the attacker to similarly scale up their operations. Thus, over the centuries, both attacker and defender became locked into an evolutionary arms race.
Right.
The siege tower got its start quite early on in this competition within the Fertile Crescent, where Mesopotamian civilizations had established the first large-scale cities. The warlike Assyrians of the 11th century BC were military pioneers who began to take the first big leaps forward when it came to siege warfare. By the 700s...
That's kind of crazy. That's a great idea. Just have this basically big river surrounding your city with big walls, because how does a siege tower work on that? But I guess you have, you have a big enough log or whatnot, you can get across that. But yeah, I mean, you have a wall, then another wall. I mean, That's pretty genius. Anyways.
BC, they were masters of taking fortified cities of the east. This involved undermining walls, building ramps, deploying scaled ladders, and wielding out never-before-seen engines of war. Multi-storied wooden towers with wheels, a turret, and a battering ram. Here's an evocative reconstruction of the best documented Assyrian siege, which took place at the city of Lachish. Quote, "The city was first surrounded to prevent escape. Next, archers..."
Yeah, this is like totally. I know. I'm gonna end up pausing a million times. I'm sorry, but look at these guys, man. They pushing the ladder and they're falling down. I mean, that's got to be scary. These guys are like throwing stuff down on them, and their arrows coming down. Like even for these guys, it got to be scary because you probably just see like people as far as the eye can see. I know I'm exaggerating, obviously, but man, these guys come to the hill just trying to hopefully make it against a wall here to get some kind of, you know, be blocked against these guys throwing down. But then look at the fire, like they were probably throwing down oil, you know, like you see in the movies, you know, and man, it's gruesome. That's a great picture. I love that.
Archers were brought forward. Quote, "The city was first surrounded to prevent escape. Next, archers were brought forward. Under the cover of giant shields, they cleared the battlements. The king then used the tried and tested Assyrian method of building an earthen ramp close to the enemy wall, covering with flat stone, and wielding forward a machine that combined a siege tower with a battering ram. The Assyrians then staged a two-pronged assault. The tower was wheeled up the ramp, and the ram brought to bear against the midsection of the enemy wall. Archers in the tower cleared the battlements, while bowmen on the ground pushed up close to the wall to cover an infantry assault with scaling ladders. The fighting appears to have been intense, and the assault probably took several days, yet eventually, the Assyrians entered the city. The nearby Egyptians too soon began to use similar tactics. For example, when the Kushite king Pia set out to conquer Lower Egypt in the mid-700s BC, he would apparently throw up structures outside of cities like Memphis to help his archers and slingers fire down upon the enemy. A couple things should stand out from these first descriptions of a siege tower when we compare it to the modern idea. The first point is that there are only ever a handful of towers deployed, and not a mass of them. The second point is that the towers are initially used in a support role to clear the battlements rather than rushing the wall immediately. And the third point is that when the siege towers do make contact with the wall, they proceed to punch holes in them rather than sending men over the top. This is already quite different from what we see.
Yeah, that is definitely quite different. So obviously from movies, and I always say this is exactly what I picture right here. And there's guys and they get over the wall, but I had no idea they used it basically as a battering ram. Like, no, basically they're using it as like a hammer to smash holes in the walls, and not necessarily to get over top of it. And this one does look a lot smaller than this one. I guess it's just the scale. All these ladders, maybe it seems even bigger than this one, but you can get a lot of uses depending on how big the castle is. You can use this to get people over, and you can use it to ram a hole in it, you know? So, yeah, definitely mind-blowing right there. And, yeah, I never really thought there'd be a whole bunch of these things, but because, you know, just the resources look how much resources that probably take to make, you know? So, and to drag that, across far distances, unless they made them right on site, which I know a lot of them did, but the resources that take, I don't think you'd probably have the time and everything to, I guess, make a whole bunch of them, and not have the resources to make a whole bunch of them. Anyways, get back to this explanation.
Holes in them rather than sending men over the top. This is already quite different from what we see in most media depictions. However, admittedly, they are never attempting to depict siege warfare from the Bronze Age, so let's cut them some slack for now, and see how things hold up as we continue to advance the timeline. Over the following centuries, siege tactics from the Near East would trickle out to the rest of the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians who founded Carthage, for instance, brought with them many military ideas from their homeland. It's for this reason that early Punic armies actually deployed chariots in battle and would bring siege towers to bear against the cities of Sicily in the 400s BC. The Greeks who were exposed to these machines, either directly or secondhand, would take note and begin to adopt them as well. For instance, Dionysius of Syracuse would be among the first to sink large sums of time and money into building up a stockpile of siege equipment. Soon, there would be many tinkerers across the Greek world sketching up new ideas for the taking of walls. When Philip II reformed the Macedonian army and began to expand the realm, he was reportedly accompanied by several renowned engineers, including Polyidus of Thessaly. They helped construct a roughly 35-meter tower at Perinthus, and yet more engines outside of Byzantium. Though these proved capable of suppressing nearby battlements, both sieges would ultimately end in failure owing to the stout resistance of the defender and their access to support from the sea. When Alexander the Great ascended to the throne, he would double down on his father's approach. Engineers traveled constantly with the Macedonian army, developing even more advanced siege towers for the conqueror's unprecedented campaigns. At the famous siege of Tyre, Alexander built a long causeway and two 50-meter towers to take the island fortress. As with most of his siege towers, they were large, wheeled structures made of wood and protected from fire by water-soaked rawhides. They were filled with all manner of offensive weaponry, including catapults and bolt throwers, in addition to archers and slingers. When the two primary towers were destroyed by the enemy, Alexander built new towers on board his ships with artillery and rams with which to assault the walls from the sea. Only a small number of these were actually given boarding equipment to then storm the walls. A similar pattern would repeat itself in the rest of Alexander's sieges, where towers might increasingly adopt bridges for special cases, but by and large stuck to their primary role of suppressing or battering down fortifications. A generation later, the successors of Alexander the Great would carry on the tradition of siege warfare. This is best epitomized in the Siege of Rhodes in 305 BC. It is here that the engineer Epimachus would build the infamous Helepolis for Demetrius of Macedon. The beast measured some 40 meters in height with 8 massive wheels. Its 9 stories were filled with shuttered windows, from which would fire a complement of almost 200 ranged troops, as well as torsional stone and arrow throwers. Similar, but smaller designs would be used in other torsional stone and arrow throwers.
See, that thing is huge. Like a battery ram, like, just use it at a tower just basically for, not necessarily to take down a wall, but just to use for protection and, to shoot bolts and stuff, man. Like, look how tiny this guy is right here. Like, that is gigantic, and that had to be pushed. Like, how many people does it take to push that thing? That's crazy. He's got to weigh a lot.
Similar, but smaller designs would be used in other sieges of the period. When the Romans rose to conquer the Mediterranean, they would absorb much of what the Greeks and others had previously pioneered. We covered this topic in our previous episode on Roman artillery, which you can check out if you're interested. However, after several centuries of relying on Greek engineers, the Romans eventually got a hang of things for themselves and became quite the experts by the late Republic. This is best evidenced by Julius Caesar, who made a regular habit of deploying large-scale fortifications. At Avaricum, mobile siege towers were built atop massive ramps to overlook the enemy fortifications and eventually storm them, while at Alesia and Dyrrhachium, static siege towers were built to reinforce his lines of encirclement.
Well, see, like, these siege towers is basically what you see in the movies, like they pointed out. So, obviously, when we watch movies, we rarely ever watch in the Bronze Age, right? We're the first ones, So I was like, okay, this is how they look like. Then when they show this, like, oh yeah, like, this is the time period that we usually think of, the Roman times and, like whatever, Middle Ages or whatnot. And yeah, this is exactly what I picture, because I do a lot of war videos, and these are kind of the pictures they show us in those, little documentaries that we watch on this channel. And they just say, like Caesar used it to get bent over. So, this guy is starting off like that's just, the movies and stuff, but yet slowly throughout this video, he's kind of basically proving that the movies are right. Maybe not the number of siege equipment, but anyways.
While at Alesia and Dyrrhachium, static siege towers were built to reinforce his lines of encirclement. We see yet more Roman war machines deployed throughout its military history. There are too many of these to cover, so I'd like to just focus on perhaps the most famous examples from the Great Jewish Revolt in the 1st century AD. It is here that in the Siege of Jerusalem, a total of 3 siege towers were brought against the walls of the city at the same time, and only 1 tower was brought against the walls of Masada. Thus we see that even in the most climactic of Roman sieges, only a handful of towers are ever used, and again, their primary role becomes one of suppression and wall battering rather than storming. Okay, so far, that's 2 strikes against the pop culture idea of siege towers. Perhaps, though, they will find redemption in the Middle Ages.
I disagree. The only thing that say is like the number of siege towers, but like like he said himself, they were used to get over the wall. The only thing that's brand new to me that I didn't really think about is used to knock the wall down. They're mainly to knock the wall down, but they also were used to get over the top. That's pretty much, I guess, what pulp culture, more focuses on is to gain over the wall when there were more to get through a wall. But like the design and everything looks pretty the same, except for you'd have like a battering ram at the bottom here. That seems like the only thing that's different. I don't know.
Pop culture idea of siege towers. Perhaps, though, they will find redemption in the Middle Ages. Let's find out. Following the fall of the Roman Empire, Western warfare generally reverted to a smaller scale. Army sizes were reduced, logistics were simplified, and the capacity to carry out complicated operations crippled. This meant that for a while you just weren't seeing many sieges anywhere near what had taken place in antiquity. For example, when the Crusaders besieged Jerusalem in 1099 AD, they did so with just about 15,000 troops and 2 towers, as compared to when the Romans had done so 1,000 years prior with roughly 60,000 men and 3 towers. Yet there were still some developments worth noting over the course of the medieval period. After all,
so this has nothing to do with siege towers, but it definitely makes sense why the early Crusaders fail. I mean, Jerusalem was built for sieges from people from like 5 times the many troops that the Crusaders came with, and so I guess it's no surprise that they lost because you need more men, more equipment if you're going to take down like a city like Jerusalem, and obviously they didn't bring more men and more stuff. So I mean, I guess the technology might be better because it is farther along, but interesting.
Yet there were still some developments worth noting over the course of the medieval period. After all, the pressures of the evolutionary arms race made sure that both attacker and defender constantly competed to outdo one another. Castles, for instance, increasingly sported moats with all kinds of impediments thrown up for protection. A common medieval tactic was to employ armored shelters to allow workers to fill in moats and level the ground in advance for an assault. Once this had been done, a tower might be built in the distance, which could then be rolled into position. As in the period of antiquity, from here it could provide additional covering fire. Slowly, this tower would then be advanced closer and closer to the walls. The besieger would have to carefully guard it against counterattacks launched either with projectiles or with sallies. Eventually, however, the tower would reach the walls themselves, at which point it could batter its way in or deploy men across the boarding bridge. From our records, it seems that this was usually the make or break point for the siege. If the defender failed to dislodge the tower, their position would be fatally compromised. However, if the defender did repulse the tower, then the attacker would probably be forced to abandon the whole operation at this point, given just how much time and money it took to carry on such sieges.
True.
It's for this reason that most fortified positions were taken with more low-risk approaches, using starvation or subterfuge. Eventually, as advanced technology like trebuchets and gunpowder made their way into the medieval arsenal, this provided a more efficient way to take fortifications than building a massive siege tower. From then on, this iconic piece of equipment.
Well, yeah, that's obviously what I was going to say. That's why the castles came more obsolete as time went on because gunpowder and whatnot, like it was just a lot easier just to smash a hole in the wall when obviously back in Roman times and back in like the Bronze Age, like that just wasn't a thing. So you were relying on these big siege towers, but obviously times change. Those videos don't story.
Than building a massive siege tower. From then on, this iconic piece of equipment would begin its decline.
Yeah.
Thus, we have seen that for most of history, the siege tower does not align with what gets depicted in most pop culture media. The 3 main points of divergence being 1. Only 1 or at most a handful of towers are ever used at the same time. 2. Towers are initially used in a support role to clear the battlements rather than rushing the wall immediately. And 3. When the siege towers do make contact with the wall, they usually proceed to punch holes in them rather than sending men directly over the top. Anyways, thanks for letting me get this off my chest. I hope you found the video both entertaining and enlightening. A huge thanks to the patrons for funding the channel. And
all right, I get where he's he's coming from. Very okay, I guess I can go along with that. obviously, a lot of the documentaries they use, it seems like they use a lot of siege towers on them, but I can definitely see, depending on the size of the siege, only a couple were used. Use as support, I guess so. Figure siege tower is like the main thing to kind of get you in there. Which he kind of set himself breach rather than the bridge. That's the big one for me. Like I didn't really think about and realize that they're used, which you never really see in siege towers in the movies, is the battering ram. On the bottom of it. So that's the big one to me that really stands out. That what I've kind of take off this video. But anyways, let me know your thoughts below. Those have been watching a while, because we do a lot of I guess videos on sieges. I guess they never really depict having a whole lot of siege towers. They only really depict having a couple. Like even like there aren't siege towers, but those towers. I think it was the Romans that had them. I forget that on the boats to take. I guess that they went against I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. But anyways, guys, please hit that like and subscribe button below. Let me know your thoughts below, and I'll catch you guys in future videos. Interesting stuff right here. Siege towers are awesome, and any kind of movie that has them is a pretty awesome movie because they're just awesome to look at, and I don't know, makes for fun and excitement. But anyways, peace. Catch you guys in future videos. I am out.